Well, now to some critical questions on the most serious scandals and crises facing this administration and this country, unasked and unanswered, in a rare interview with one of the most controversial members of the Obama administration. The Attorney General of the United States, Eric Holder, talking to ABC News. He wound up suggesting that the criticism of the Obama administration is often based on racism, and we'll get to that in a minute. But first, the Attorney General was not asked about a number of much more urgent issues. Among them, the administration's strained relationship with the truth in so many instances, where the investigation stands into the IRS's targeting of conservatives. It's been in the news a little bit. Why the Attorney General hasn't appointed a special counsel. Why former IRS official Lois Lerner has not been charged. Why he did appoint an Obama donor to lead the investigation. For that matter, why Democrats have repeatedly mischaracterized the Supreme Court decision in the Hobby Lobby case, which Mr. Holder lost. Or the administration's terrible track record at the U.S. Supreme Court, having several unanimous decisions against it. 20 times they've been ruled against unanimously by this court. The Attorney General was not asked to make the administration's case for expanding executive authority and perhaps threatening our constitutional system, as Professor Jonathan Turley and others have alleged in congressional testimony, and we could go on. Joining me now, Judge Andrew Napolitano, who's our Fox News senior judicial analyst. I mean, really? There was not a question about the IRS?
The interview on ABC News about which you refer was so tepid. It was almost as if Eric Holder was running for office and this was his campaign manager questioning him. I mean, this is not a political crisis. This is a constitutional crisis, Megan. The American people have a right to know there is a chief law enforcement officer of the land, and he is A, enforcing the law impartially, and B, telling the truth about what he's doing. It appears that the Attorney General is doing neither. For him to suggest seriously and repeatedly in that ABC News interview, we'll just take one subject matter because it's the hottest there is right now, that the immigration laws of the United States of America are being enforced is laughable, reprehensible, contrary to the truth, and an insult to the American people. The reason we have this crisis on the southwestern border of the United States is A, because the President of the United States decided to stop enforcing immigration laws. B, the President of the United States gave a signal to people south of the border, come here and we won't deport you. And C, because his chief law enforcement officer lacks the intestinal fortitude and moral courage to say, Mr. President, you're violating your oath. Your job is to enforce the law and not to tweak and find ways around it.
And you look at sort of where they did go. I mean, Eric Holder is a very important figure in America right now, and getting an interview with him would be huge. And I've said many times, that's my number one interview I would like to do. Number one is Eric Holder, because there are so many important things to ask him about, so much of which was left on the table. And I ask you, Judge, whether our chief law enforcement officer chose the interviewer he did for that reason. A softball interview, with all due respect to that correspondent. He pressed him on a couple of issues. But these, I mean, the IRS, the dishonesty by the administration when it comes to Supreme Court rulings against Eric Holder's DOJ, that doesn't get mentioned? I
don't know if that interviewer is a lawyer or even a person with a special interest in or knowledge about the Attorney General's job.
He talked to him about how he feels about the Washington Redskins.
Correct. The interviewer did not probe the defects in the Department of Justice today. And again, Megan, this is beyond politics. This is the American people going to bed at night without knowing that the important federal laws are being enforced, and with knowing that the person in charge of them is misleading them about what the Department of Justice is doing. There are FBI agents who are almost embarrassed to do their work for this Justice Department.
Let me ask you something, Judge. Let me ask you something, because you were a judge. You sat in an actual courtroom. You know, you were a litigator as well. Most lawyers are not afraid to face the tough questions.
Correct.
You go up there, it's a gift to be asked the tough questions, because that gives you the opportunity to actually explain why the questioner is wrong, and you can prove it to them.
It is also a gift and a special trust to be the Attorney General of the United States. Eric Holder is a smart person and a very good lawyer, but he is not taking his job seriously to enforce the federal laws. His ability to enforce federal law is independent of the wishes of the president, and it must be so. Otherwise, all federal law would be enforced politically. It's the reason the Attorney General is independent. He's not taking that job seriously.
Is supposed to be. Judge, good to see you.
Good to see you.
Well, as I mentioned, the Attorney General was invited to go off on one of his favorite themes: why some of the president's critics are motivated by racism.
There's a certain level of vehemence, it seems to me, that's directed at me, directed at the president. You know, people talk about taking their country back. There's a certain racial component to this for some people. I don't think this is the thing, is a main driver, but for some, there's a racial animus.
Jason Riley is a Wall Street Journal editorial board member, a Fox News contributor, and author of Please Stop Helping Us: How Liberals Make It Harder for Blacks to Succeed. Jason, good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
What is controversial about what he said, that we need to engage each other more on racial issues and that some people are motivated by racial animus?
Well, I like the hedging, some. He said, you know, it's not all about racial animus, but enough of it is for me to complain about it on national television. That was sort of the message. Well, it's absurd on its face. I mean, he was black. President Obama was black before he was elected. He was also black before he was reelected. So the idea that none of the criticism lodged against this president has to do with his performance and that most of it has to do with his race is absurd.
But let me stop you there, because he didn't say none of the criticism, and he didn't say that most are motivated by race.
He said that enough of it is to complain about on national television.
What do you think is the message there? I mean, obviously, it's not some minuscule amount in his mind, otherwise it wouldn't be worthy of mention.
This is about politics. This is about Democrats concerned about minority turnout in November, and they have nothing to offer these constituents that they want to come out to the polls for.
This is a head fake?
You look at the economy, you look at the job situation, they have nothing to offer. So all they offer is scaremongering. That's what this was about.
This is trying to motivate voters. It's basically, I mean, we led the show tonight with the world in crisis.
Yeah.
And it's look over here, look over here.
Exactly. It's motivate them by scaring them, telling them that voter ID laws suppress the black vote, even though black voter turnout in 2012 exceeded the rate of white voter turnout, even in the states with the strictest voter ID laws. So essentially, it's lying to people to scare them to the polls.
The reporter, to his credit, did ask him about a dicey issue, which was Eric Holder, not long ago, called us a nation of cowards when it comes to race. And this was how the Attorney General responded.
No, I wouldn't walk away from that speech. I think we are still a nation that is too afraid to confront racial issues. You know, we had the Sterling incident. You have what that rancher said. Those are opportunities for us to engage with one another across the color line and talk about racial issues, and we too infrequently do that.
What do you make of that?
Eric Holder doesn't want to have an honest conversation about race in this country, neither does President Obama. Earlier this year, they went up to Harlem to Al Sharpton's annual convention and gave speeches where they complained about voter ID law and the supposed unfair treatment they receive because they're black. You do not run to Al Sharpton to unify this country racially. You do so when you want to do the opposite, in fact. He's one of the most racially divisive people in this country. But black leaders in this country want to keep that narrative, Megan, on race, on racism as an all-purpose explanation for all that ails black Americans. That is their focus. That's all they want to talk about. And this president and Eric Holder are no different.
Jason, great to see you.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. Well, a moment ago, Judge Napolitano mentioned the mess on our southern border and how administration policies may be encouraging that crisis. Today, we got a rare and exclusive look at some of the fallout from the crush of immigrants. And our Fox News senior national correspondent, John Roberts, is live at the border tonight with those exclusive details. John?
Megan, good evening to you. Indeed, we had a rare experience. The Department of Homeland Security led us into the McAllen Border Patrol detention facility, the first television cameras to ever go in there, and it really was an eye-opening experience. Despite the fact that the number of apprehensions is down, that facility was still jammed. A little more than 460 people there. That is down from a peak of 1,500, but still really, really crowded. We saw a lot of those unaccompanied children we've heard so much about. Some of them seem to be doing well. They appeared to be sort of making the best of it, but others that we saw were completely distraught about being in detention and not being with any adults in their family. You also get a real appreciation for the task that the Border Patrol agents have. The processing area was busier than an airline counter. The Border Patrol agents consumed with administrative duties as opposed to being out there on the front lines pursuing the bad guys. Despite the drop in the number of apprehensions, there's still a huge problem here. We took an exclusive tour of the border with Texas Republican Congressman Louis Gohmert over the weekend. We found many rafts that were up on shore, a lot of life jackets from people who had crossed. Gohmert is a big critic of the president's $3.7 billion emergency appropriation request, saying the president's targeting the money all wrong and that Congress will come up with its own plan.
We are going to secure the border, and we, Republicans in the House, are going to force you to follow the law, and we're not going to allow you, like you did with your DREAM Act, to just pronounce new law into being because you wouldn't work with us.
You know, Gohmert is a big proponent of this, and there's a lot of talk in Congress about expedited removal of the people who come across the border illegally. That is something that the Border Patrol Union and a lot of its members, a lot of the Border Patrol agents support, and that is when people come here illegally, send them back.
The only way to stem that tide is going to be mandatory detention, mandatory removal, because you have to send the message, not just the verbal message, you have to send the physical message, which is once you come in, we will send you back.
The Immigration and Customs Enforcement Administration today announced that 40 so-called family units, that would be mothers and children or fathers and children, had been sent back to Central America. 40 of them were sent back. Megan, over the last 10 months, 55,000 have come in, and they sent 40 back today.
Wow. John Roberts, thank you.